Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Friday, December 13th, 2024. All right, the first story at the top of antiwar.com today. Israel killed over 5,000 Gaza civilians in October 2023. So Air Wars, which is a group that's based in the UK that monitors air campaigns and civilian harm, they released a new report on Thursday that found Israeli forces killed a minimum of 5,139 civilians during the first 25 days of its bombing campaign in Gaza, starting on October 7th, 2023. So in just the first 25 days, and they examined 606 incidents of civilian harm and found that in those incidents, only 32 to 60 militants were killed in those same strikes. Using the higher estimate of 60 militant deaths, that means the ratio of civilians to combatants killed in the 606 incidents is about 85 to 1. And then using the lower militant estimate of 32 brings it to a ratio of about 160 to 1. Air Wars said that the scale of civilian harm was incomparable to any other 21st century conflict, and that the number of civilians killed in the first 25 days was nearly 4 times more civilians reported killed in a single month than in any conflict Air Wars has documented since it was established in 2014. So the report detailed the huge number of children killed in Gaza during the first 25 days. The report reads, quote, Air Wars recorded a minimum of 1,900 children killed by Israeli military action in Gaza. This is nearly 7 times higher than even the most deadly month for children previously recorded by Air Wars, end quote. You see this chart here that this account, History Speaks, made. They made a little graph here with the civilian to militant deaths, and it just goes to show 99.4% civilians, 0.6% militants. Again, in these 606 incidents that they looked at, other things happened in this time, but this was what they have investigated. And Air Wars recorded a minimum number of 1,213 women that were killed in these 606 incidents. Women and children were mainly killed in residential buildings in strikes that often slaughtered many members of the same family. The report reads, quote, families were killed together in unprecedented numbers and in their homes. More than 9 out of 10 women and children were killed in residential buildings. In more than 95% of all cases where a woman was killed, at least one child was also killed, end quote. So more than 9 out of 10 women and children were killed in residential buildings. The report said that Air Wars assumes each person is a civilian unless there is evidence to the contrary. The report reads, quote, using publicly available information, Air Wars makes every effort to investigate connections between individuals killed and militant groups. Evidence includes any suggestion in local sources that directly associates individuals with participation in hostilities or membership in a militant group, end quote. So this is how all the pro-Israel defenders are going to attack this report, is how they, they assume that people are civilians unless there's clear evidence they are militants, which seems pretty logical to me, but that's how everybody is kind of attacking this report. Air Wars also said that it did not capture incidents where militants were killed, and there's no evidence of civilian harm. The group stresses in the report that the 5,139 civilians recorded killed is the minimum number based on the 606 incidents. Air Wars is also assessing other incidents that caused civilian harm during the same 25-day period. So this isn't even all of the incidents, airstrikes, and everything that they're investigating in these 25 days. And if you go to their site, if you look at the report, which I linked to here and we link to on the front page, you can find, how they investigate individual airstrikes and what they find. And then they, have gathered names and they look into the people. So it's very meticulous work that they do here. And this aligns with reporting that we've seen from 972 magazine, which is an Israeli publication. They revealed in a report in November 2023, this came out, that the Israeli military was intentionally bombing civilian targets, including high-rise residential buildings, public buildings, and infrastructure, which it labeled power targets. The 972 report said that the purpose of bombing power targets was mainly to harm Palestinian civil society, to create a shock that, among other things, will reverberate powerfully and lead civilians to put pressure on Hamas. So that's how 972 worded it. But basically, confirmation that Israel was, in fact, intentionally hitting civilian targets, which is very clear at the time. I mean, this was when the bombing was at its heaviest in October, November, December 2023. And the Israeli sources who spoke to 972 said that the Israeli military was generally aware of how many civilians would be killed in a particular strike and would launch an attack to kill one Hamas militant, knowing that hundreds of civilians would be killed. I want to read this quote. This is, again, from that report in November 2023. This is an Israeli source who said, quote, "Nothing happens by accident when a 3-year-old girl is killed in a home in Gaza. It's because someone in the army decided it wasn't a big deal for her to be killed, that it was a price worth paying in order to hit another target. We are not Hamas. These are not random rockets. Everything is intentional. We know exactly how much collateral damage there is in every home," end quote. And then earlier this year, there was another report from 972 magazine that revealed how the Israeli military was using AI to track Hamas militants and create targets. And this AI system makes errors and can falsely label people as militants who are not. They said there's about a 10% error rate in that system. And one of these systems is called Where's Daddy, because they use it to track Hamas members. And then they bomb them in their homes when they're with their families. And in at least one incident, the Israeli military authorized the killing of approximately 300 civilians to kill one Hamas commander. Again, this is all from the 972 reporting, and this Air Wars report bolsters that. But one thing the 972 reporting suggests, in a way, that Israel only launches a strike if they know they'll kill at least one Hamas guy. The Air Wars report, based on their findings, throws that out the window, that they were just bombing civilian targets. That's what that data suggests. But also the 972, again, it says that they were intentionally targeting these power targets, which the purpose was just basically to terrorize civilians. So, I mean, it just goes to show what the U.S. has been supporting, bolsters the case, showing that this is genocide. This is Air Wars is a very reputable organization. I know the U.S. military has used them to assess civilian casualties in their own air campaigns. And, so this is a big deal. It hasn't gotten much attention, but I hope, we have it at the top of our page. I hope it gets around some more. I mean, I think it's just pretty damning stuff. And again, this is just the first 25 days. All right, so the next one here, we have the full Air Wars report linked to on the page. The next one, the daily violence in Gaza. Israel kills dozens in Gaza, including a surgeon. So Israeli strikes across the Gaza Strip killed dozens more Palestinians on Thursday, including an orthopedic surgeon in northern Gaza who was traveling between hospitals. Gaza's health ministry said an Israeli quadcopter drone shot and killed Dr. Saeed Joda while he was traveling from Kamal Adwan Hospital in Beit Lahia to Al-Auda Hospital in Jabalia. So both of these northern Gaza cities have been under a total siege as part of an ethnic cleansing campaign. And he was said to be the last orthopedic surgeon in northern Gaza. So he was going from hospital to hospital, doing what he could. And he was killed. Israel killed him with a quadcopter. And the health ministry said that his killing brought the total number of medical staff killed by Israel since October 2023 to 1,057. I mean, that is a huge number. And then on Thursday evening, Israeli strikes pounded the Nusayrat refugee camp in central Gaza, targeting several homes. At least 33 Palestinians were reported killed in the attacks, including children. Medical sources told Al Jazeera that at least 71 Palestinians were killed in strikes across the Strip on Thursday. So absolutely just horrific. Daily slaughter continues in Gaza. And then the next one here, over a dozen killed in Israeli drone attack on Gaza aid convoy. So this article's from Middle East Eye. This has also happened on Thursday, but I thought it was worth having a separate story on this. An Israeli drone attack on an aid convoy in southern Gaza killed at least 15 people, including several aid workers and aid guards, compounding a worsening hunger crisis in the enclave. The strike on Thursday has also left more than 30 people injured, including some in critical condition, west of Khan Yunis in the southern Gaza Strip. According to people in the area and local media, a number of those killed were aid groups who were present to prevent looting. Aid guards who were there to prevent lootings and chaos from arising at distribution points. Nasser Banat, whose son and son-in-law were guarding aid before they were killed in the attacks, told Middle East Eye that the Israeli army targets such convoys because they believe the armed aid guards are Hamas-backed. So Israel's claiming that they were Hamas or something, but these are people guarding the aid shipments. And, there's been this reporting from Israeli media saying that Israel is allowing gangs to loot aid trucks. They're allowing the chaos to happen. And this, I think, is more evidence of that. All right, so the next one here, this is a really sad story. Death feels imminent for 96% of Gaza's children. This article is from the New Arab. It's about a survey that was done in Gaza. Death feels imminent to most children in Gaza, a shocking new survey which details the psychological impact of Israel's ongoing and relentless war on Gaza has found. The survey, carried out by the Community Training Center for Crisis Management based in Gaza and supported by the UK-based War Child Alliance, found that 96% of Gaza's children surveyed felt that death is imminent, and 92% of children surveyed were not accepting reality. The survey interviewed over 500 children, parents, and caregivers from families where at least one child is disabled, wounded, or unaccompanied. The study also surveyed a significant portion of households where children under the age of 17 headed the family. Helen Pattinson, CEO of War Child UK, said, quote, "In my 23 years or so working in the system, I have never seen a statistic that bleak that 96% of children feel death is imminent. It's a very, very sad reality indeed," end quote. So the CEO says in a conflict, typically 22% of a child population would need psychological support and recovery, but in Gaza, that number is 100%. And then another just horrific statistic is 49% wish to die. 49% of the children that they surveyed wish they were dead. I mean, what do you even say about that? But this is a war on children, and it's just relentless, and they've been living like this for over a year now. Remember how long a year feels like in a child's life. All right, so the next one here, Israel sees an opportunity to bomb Iran. So the Israeli military believes there is now an opportunity to bomb Iran due to the weakening of its allies in the region following the ousting of former Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. The Times of Israel reported on Thursday. I saw Haaretz had a similar report saying that the IDF thinks the regime change is going to help when it comes to bombing Iran. An Israeli military official said that in the wake of the regime change in Syria, the Israeli Air Force has increased its preparations for a potential attack on Iran. The report said the IDF is considering launching strikes on Iran's nuclear program. Of course, the claim is that Iran wants a nuclear weapon, but there's no evidence of that. And that was recently acknowledged by the CIA. There has been more talk of abandoning the Ayatollah's policy. He's forbidden the development of weapons of mass destruction, saying it's against Islam. And there has been a lot of talk of members of parliament calling to re-examine that policy because of what Israel's been doing in the region. But still, there's no evidence that Iran's made any kind of decision like that to pursue a bomb. So, but what's interesting here is that they're saying, Israeli officials are saying, now that they've decimated Syria's military, took out its air defenses, that they have complete and total air superiority over Syria. They're saying they could fly over it. They could send surveillance drones over it. They could fly over Damascus. They could do whatever they want over Syria now. And they're saying that that will make it easier for them to bomb Iran. So that's a whole other aspect of this. Previously, Israel bombed Syria all the time, but they did have to avoid air defenses. In certain parts of Syria, they wouldn't fly over, but now they're saying that, it's free. They could do whatever they want now. So it just goes to show you what Israel is thinking. They're clearly on the offense, obviously, in all these different arenas. But when it comes to Iran, I think they do have, they might want to get another kind of round of escalation going again here. So Israel last bombed Iran in October, attacks that damaged some air defense systems. We don't really know the extent of the damage. Iran downplayed it. There were Western media reports saying that some systems were completely destroyed. But we do know that it killed 4 Iranian soldiers and 1 civilian. That came after Iran launched its ballistic missile strikes on Israel, which they did that in retaliation for a string of escalations in the region. So another thing to keep an eye on, the next one here, Netanyahu says that Iran regime change will come a lot sooner than people think. This article is from Kyle Anzalone at the Libertarian Institute. So Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu issued a fresh threat to carry out regime change in Iran. The Israeli leader said Tel Aviv had scored a recent series of victories over Iran. So he's riding high on the regime change in Syria. In an English-speaking address to the people of Iran, he slammed Tehran for subjugating the Iranian people and promised, quote, "One day you will be free," end quote. That was a short quote. He also says he's going to transform the Middle East. And he said that, you're going to get this freedom, which means regime change, a lot sooner than people think. He issued a similar address saying it was to the people of Iran back in September. Basically saying the same thing, that this is going to happen a lot sooner than we think. So again, I do think they're riding high right now. They've captured some territory in Syria. They might push in further. They might try to do some damage to Iran during this transition period. This is the opportunity for Netanyahu to really do something on the Iranian front. All right, so the next one here, Israeli drone strike kills 2 in South Lebanon. So this article is from Jason Ditz. The southern Lebanese town of Qiyam has increasingly become a centerpiece for the struggles with the Israel-Lebanon ceasefire. Just hours after Israeli troops withdrew from the town, there was an Israeli drone attack on the town square, killing at least 2 people. So they've killed more people. Lebanon's prime minister issued a statement condemning the attack, noting that the Lebanese military is already deploying around the town as per requirements of the ceasefire. He called for the U.S. and French-led committee to clarify their stance on the ceasefire violations. So who's supposed to oversee, the ceasefire and determine if there's violations and take action? It's the U.S. It's the U.S. and France, but it's the U.S. and the U.S. is obviously doesn't care that Israel keeps bombing Lebanon. They gave them a letter assuring them that they could continue to take military action in Lebanon, and that's exactly what they've done. So now in the past 2 weeks, since there's supposed to have been a ceasefire in effect, there's been nearly 200 Israeli violations, and around 30 people in Lebanon have been killed. I don't know the exact breakdown, but I know there's been civilians killed. So Israel's just bombing Lebanon with impunity here. All right, so the next one here, Israeli settlers land in Syria and Lebanon. So this article is from 972 magazine. Within hours of the fall of the Assad regime, Israeli forces were already pushing into Syrian territory, conquering the Syrian side of Mount Hermon and the buffer zone between Syria and the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights that has been in place for more than half a century. But the army were not the only ones quick to react. So too was the Israeli settler movement. One member of Yuri Tasfan, which is a settler group founded earlier this year to promote Israeli settlement in southern Lebanon, wrote on WhatsApp, quote, We have to conquer and destroy as much as possible and as quickly as possible. We need to check, according to the new laws in Syria, whether Israelis are allowed to invest in real estate and start buying land there, end quote. So the Nasrallah movement, led by Daniela Weiss, who has been spearheading efforts in recent months to resettle Gaza, expressed similar sentiment in a post on Facebook. She said, quote, "Whoever still thinks it's possible to leave our fate in the hands of a foreign actor forsakes Israel's security. Jewish settlement is the only thing that will bring about regional stability and security for the state of Israel, along with a stable economy, national resilience, and deterrence. In Gaza, in Lebanon, in the entire Golan Heights, including the Syrian plateau, and in the entire Mount Hermon," end quote. So she's talking about the territory that they just captured. And in this post, she added a map titled Abraham's Borders, in which Israel's territory includes the entirety of Lebanon, as well as most of Syria and Iraq. And this is not mere talk. These groups mean business. Nasrallah has already mapped out where it plans to build new Jewish settlements across the Gaza Strip and claims that more than 700 families are ready to move in when they have the opportunity. Last week, Yuri Tasfan, this is the other group that wants to settle Lebanon. They're focused on that. They attempted to... they made their first attempt at a land grab. They went into southern Lebanon, tried to set something up. They were evicted by Israeli troops. But I think in Gaza, if a few hundred Israeli settlers get in there and set up, I think they're going to have a real, hard time getting them out if they want to get them. I think there's a chance the Israeli troops, we've seen social media activity from Israeli soldiers in Gaza saying, that there should be settlements and everything, and doing little symbolic things to try to make that happen. So the settlements in Gaza, I know I've been saying this a lot lately, but I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing them pop up soon. And it would be in the Netzarim corridor where the Israeli military bases are. All right, so the next one here, where was I? HTS tight-lipped on Israeli airstrikes and the occupation of Syria. This article is from the Cradle. So this is interesting. Obeida Arnott, a spokesman for the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham extremist group that just took over Syria after a joint assault with Turkish-backed fighters, refused to address Israel's airstrikes across the country in an interview aired by British news outlet Channel 4. And this interview was conducted on Wednesday. So during the interview, Arnaout avoided answering the question twice. When asked about his reaction to the over 300 Israeli airstrikes on Syria, he said, quote, "Our priority is to restore security and services, to revive civilian life and institutions, and care for newly liberated cities. There are many urgent parts of day-to-day life to restore: bakeries, electricity, water, communications. So our priority is to provide those services to the people," end quote. And then the reporter for Channel 4 said, "You have nothing to say about Israel striking, Israel strikes and the land grab. You have nothing to say." And then he replied, quote, "Have no doubt. We want everyone to respect the sovereignty of the new Syria. The point is very important to us," end quote. So no criticism of Israel there. I guess they probably don't want to upset the U.S. I think they're really courting for U.S. support right now. But it just goes to show, Israel bombed, this says over 300, but Israel says they launched 480 strikes and they've taken Syrian territory and they got nothing to say about it. All right, so the next one here, Trump slams long-range missile strikes on Russia. So President-elect Donald Trump has said that he vehemently disagrees with the U.S. supporting long-range missile strikes inside Russian territory, which President Biden authorized last month. Trump said in an interview with Time magazine, quote, "I disagree very vehemently with sending missiles hundreds of miles into Russia. Why are we doing that? We're just escalating this war and making it worse. That should not have been allowed to be done," end quote. So as we've been covering a lot, Biden took this step despite the huge risk of escalation. And it's not going to do anything to help Ukraine's chances of victory, which has been acknowledged by U.S. officials, but they did it anyway. So good to see Trump criticizing it. Good that it's made some headlines. I think he should have made it clear that this was his position much earlier on, because of these huge risks. But it's good to see this at least. And then, he was talking about Ukraine more. He just always goes back to, oh, this never would have happened when I was president. Whenever anybody asks him, like, what is he going to do? So we'll see. Only time will tell what Donald Trump will do when it comes to Ukraine. All right, so the next one here, France and Poland discuss troops to monitor future Ukraine ceasefire. So on Thursday, French President Emmanuel Macron and Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk discussed the idea of sending troops to Ukraine if a ceasefire is reached. And this is an idea reportedly favored by Trump. So we had a good Trump story, now a not so good Trump story here. Tusk said that while the idea of sending troops to Ukraine was discussed, Warsaw is not planning any such actions, at least for the moment. So there was a report in Polish media that claimed France had this great idea to establish an international peacekeeping force of 40,000 troops from around the world. That is a big peacekeeping force. And a Polish official said in response that they were surprised by that number, 40,000, and they said any peacekeeping force should be under the UN or the OSCE, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. The idea of a NATO deployment to Ukraine as part of a peace deal is just, Russia's never going to go for that. But apparently this is something, according to this report there's a report in the Wall Street Journal that said Trump told Macron and Zelensky when he recently met with them in Paris that he wants European troops in Ukraine to monitor a potential future ceasefire deal. He says he wants Europe to, step up and give more support to Ukraine. But again, this idea, Russia would just never go for any kind of NATO deployment. If it was an international, peacekeeping under the UN, that's a different story. But just European countries sending their military over there, Russia would just not go for that. All right, so the last story here, NATO chief calls for Cold War level military spending. So on Thursday, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte called for the alliance to significantly increase military spending up to Cold War levels and to adopt a wartime mindset. He said, quote, "It is true that we spend more on defense now than we did a decade ago, but we are still spending far less than during the Cold War, even though the threats to our freedom and security are just as big, if not bigger. During the Cold War, Europeans spent far more than 3% of their GDP on defense," end quote. So Rutte, a former Dutch prime minister, suggested Europe could increase military spending by making cuts from pensions and health services. Rutte said, quote, "I know spending more on defense means spending less on other priorities, but it is only a little less. On average, European countries easily spend up to a quarter of their national income on pensions, health, and social security systems. We need a small fraction of that money to make our defenses much stronger and to preserve our way of life," end quote. Suggesting to cut things like that over what? This just creating, NATO has just created an enemy basically out of Russia. He's claiming that once Russia, the whole gist of this is that, if Russia makes it through Ukraine, then we're next. Then war's coming to our soil. And if they just didn't support this proxy war, there would be a peace deal and then that threat would go away. But nope, NATO needs money, more spending on military. They need more enemies. He said that Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea are hard at work trying to weaken North America and Europe. And Rutte, he's the new head of NATO. He replaced Jens Stoltenberg in October. So has not been. This was like his first major speech that he gave, and this is what he decided to say. All right, so that is it for the news for today. Go check out our viewpoints. One from Jonathan Cook. Syria's Assad has fallen just as Pentagon planned 23 years ago. One from Ted Snyder. Trading Iran for Al-Qaeda. One from Thomas Knapp. Brian Mast as foreign policy indicator. New boss, same as the old boss. One from Eldar Mamdov. McCarthyism, European style, elite crackdown on Ukraine dissent. And one from Aramate. In Syria, dirty war, our side has won. Referring to Al-Qaeda being on our side, the infamous email that Jake Sullivan sent to Hillary Clinton back in 2012. Go check out our blog. Lots of good stuff over there. This is the last show of the week, so that's it. I hope everyone has a good weekend. I have a little bit of a cold. I was a little out of it, so I hope you didn't hear my cold too much in this, but you could always support this show. Like, subscribe, comment. Oh, one thing I want to mention. So Christmas is coming up. I'm going to be taking off Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. So the way it's going to work is that week I'm going to do 2 shows and then 2 days off and then 1 show. And then if anything major happens on Christmas, we'll update stories on the page. But hopefully there's some peace this Christmas. So that is it for me for today. I will see you in a few days. Thanks for listening.